Since its global release in 2018, there have been 84 different brawlers added to the game. Many of these brawlers were met with hate and criticism, but no brawler has received more hate than Edgar. A close-range brawler that can jump onto weakened enemies. A brawler that has seen almost no competitive play, somehow manages to be one of the most polarizing brawlers in the game. Today, we will take a deeper look into why Edgar became the most hated brawler in Brawl Stars. To understand how Edgar got to this point, we need to go all the way back to the day it was released almost 4 years ago, on December 19th, 2020. If you have played any Supercell game over the years, you would probably know that Christmas is the best time to be playing. Special events and rewards are common across all Supercell titles alike. Brawl Stars in 2020 was no exception to this. The Brawladays event featured a wide variety of new features. The most significant of them were two new brawlers, Edgar and Byron, and this was the first time that Brawl Stars would give away a brawler for free. If you logged on during the Brawladays event, anytime during December 19th through January 7th, you could unlock Edgar for free. This meant nearly every player who played somewhat regularly would be able to unlock him. Giving away a brawler for free might seem like a good idea, but it creates a unique problem that most players had never seen before. To understand this problem, we have to take a look at the old system of progression in Brawl Stars. Before the system of Brawl Passes, Star Drops, and Credits, we had Brawl Boxes. This system was flawed and created progression paths that were less than linear. You could play significantly more than your friend who started at the same time, yet unlocked new brawlers slower based off only luck. This RNG mechanic meant generally, most players were not unlocking brawlers at the same time. Unlike today, where if you have all of the brawlers unlocked, you can bank enough credits to always unlock the new brawler when it's released. Before the switch to the new credit system, we had rarely seen the problem that was created by giving away Edgar for free. Lobbies were almost 100% Edgars for the entire Brawladays event. This made even Edgar's release problematic because for 19 days lobbies were rampant with Edgar players. It did not matter what game mode you played, Showdown, Brawl Ball, Heist, Bounty, even the limited time mode, Present Plunder. If you are a new generation player, this might seem like a regular occurrence that happens every time a new brawler is added. This just was not the case before the rework to progression that happened in December of 2022. With every player running the same brawler in almost every game, Edgar may have been doomed from the start. Most players were sick of playing with and against him in the first week of his release. Had this been a different brawler, the reception may have been more positive. To understand what makes Edgar so frustrating, we need to take a look at his attacks. Edgar is a fast melee brawler that attacks with his scarf. He had relatively low health when he was released. To combat this, Supercell gave him a new mechanic we had not seen prior to this, lifesteal. This meant Edgar's main attack would not only damage the enemy, but it would also heal himself. Along with this new mechanic, Edgar would have a mechanic only Daryl had at the time, a passive supercharge. Similar to Daryl as well, Edgar's super would allow him to travel a decent distance, only his allowed him to jump over walls. Edgar had 4,200 health when he was initially added to the game, and his attack did 756 damage and healed 189 HP per shot. This made him incredibly hard to deal with once he was able to close the distance. Edgar's star power Hard Landing dealt 1,000 damage to anyone within a 3-tile radius of his super landing. His Let's Fly gadget increased his passive supercharge rate by 700% for 3 seconds, giving him a fully charged super at the click of a button. This is the first time we got a glimpse of what a melee brawler with an on-demand movement super could do. Being able to jump onto brawlers with less HP made the playstyle of Edgar extremely toxic. Edgar was in one of his strongest states soon after his release because not many people knew how to counter him outside of using shotgun brawlers like Shelly or Bull. Edgar was so strong he would receive 3 different nerfs and 1 buff in his first 4 months of being in the game. On January 14th, 2021, only 1 week after the Brawladays event, Edgar would receive a nerf to his Let's Fly gadget, taking the supercharge rate from 700% down to 525%. Along with this, the gadget's duration would be increased from 3 seconds to 4 seconds. This change had little to no impact. Using a gadget would still very quickly charge Edgar's super before and after the change. On January 18th, 2021, Supercell would add an additional star power for Edgar, Fisticuffs. This star power would allow Edgar to heal an additional 25% HP from his attack damage, doubling the healing effect. This made it even harder to stop Edgar once he closed the distance. Edgar would continue to be a nuisance for a short period of time. On February 8th, 2021, Edgar would receive another nerf, this time to the number of hits needed to fully charge a super, going from 10 down to 12. This change would not be very effective in nerfing Edgar because he would still passively charge super. This would lead Supercell to nerf him again on March 15th of 2021, this time going after his base hit points, taking him from 3,000 down to 2,800 at power level 1. This nerf would knock Edgar quickly out of the meta, going from one of the best brawlers in the game to a below average brawler almost overnight. During the period of time after this big nerf, Edgar would start to garner a reputation of being a menace to lower skilled players. The no skill mechanics of simply pressing the green button to almost instantly charge a super, then auto aim a super, then spam auto aim did not make for a high skill ceiling. Anyone who loads up the game could play Edgar at a decent level. This problem would become a double-edged sword. A bad player would not know how to counter an Edgar and think that maybe Edgar was a better brawler than he actually was. This resulted in bad players playing Edgar in situations that did not make sense. The longer Edgar was in Brawl Stars, the worse off in the meta he seemed to get. On July 8, 2021, Edgar would receive a new gadget, Hardcore. This gadget would give Edgar a decaying shield that started at 2000 HP. This gadget would not do much for him in the meta. Over 5 months after this health nerf, Supercell would attempt to bring balance to Edgar by giving him an increase in his main attack life leech, going from 25% to 35%. This was not enough to make him viable in the competitive scene. Throughout Edgar's lifetime, Supercell would struggle to maintain a good balance for him. It seemed like among lower trophy players, he was a brawler that needed the nerf the most. Among pro players, the opposite was true. He would see little to no use among the top players in Brawl Stars. This problem might stem from the fact that his attacking mechanics have such a low skill ceiling. There is almost no aiming required to play Edgar at a decent level. Anyone can pick up a device and play him at a decent level. This is where most of the frustration from the brawler comes. His playstyle would garner a skillless reputation, and a toxic one at that. Edgar and the dreaded thumbs down pin would become like peanut butter and jelly. For nearly 2 years, Supercell would leave Edgar in this state, a nightmare for low-level players yet not viable for competitive players. On April 25th, Edgar's health nerf would be reverted, going back from 2,800 back to his original 3,000. This would not do much for Edgar, so Supercell would double down on trying to make him viable among competitive players. Almost 5 months later, on September 5th, 2023, Edgar would receive another base HP buff, going from 3,000 to 3,300. These attempts to make Edgar viable among competitive players would prove to be ineffective. He would receive 2 additional buffs coming to one of his gadgets and one of his star powers on October 24th, 2023. His hardcore gadget shield would be increased from 2,000 to 2,640 and would now scale with his level. The next change would come to his hard landing star power. The damage was increased from 1,000 to 1,215 and now scaled with his power level. These changes still would not do the trick. It seemed like this was all Edgar was destined for, to be useless at the highest level but a menace to the lowest level. That is, until September 5th of 2023, Supercell would release the first 6 hypercharges into the game. Shelly, Colt, Bull, Jackie, Pearl, and Spike would all receive hypercharges. Hypercharges were a controversial addition at first because so few brawlers would have one. Supercell planned to release 6 hypercharges at a time until all of the brawlers had one. Since the hypercharges were so strong, it would be a nightmare to balance the meta. It seemed like whichever brawlers received hypercharges would spring up to the top of the meta. This was an interesting concept because brawlers that had spent most of their time at the bottom of the meta could now have a chance to be viable among competitive players. The next wave of hypercharges came on October 24th, 2023. Charlie, Colette, Jessie, Rosa, Maisie, and Lou would all receive hypercharges. Again, this would rocket these brawlers to the top of the meta. The Brawl Talk of December 9th, 2023 would change everything for Edgar. Supercell would announce the next round of hypercharges. Leon, Crow, Bang, Dynamite, Miko, and finally, Edgar. On December 12, 2023, Edgar would receive his biggest change to date, the introduction of his hypercharge, Outburst. This would take him from one of the worst brawlers in the game to arguably the best brawler in the game overnight. His hypercharge had one of the fastest charging charge rates in the game. It would take Edgar just over 2 supers to fully charge a hypercharge. Paired with his Let's Fly gadget, Edgar could cycle through 3 to 4 hypercharges in a full-length game. He was unstoppable for an amazing 6 days. On December 18, 2023, Edgar's hypercharge would receive an emergency nerf to its charge rate, going from 40% down to 25% per super. This would tone him down quite a bit, but he still remained very strong in the meta. If Edgar was strong in competitive play, he was an absolute terror for low-level players. Having a brawler with such a low skill ceiling being this strong was problematic for the game. This is why, on February 27th of 2024, Supercell would make 5 different changes to Edgar's hypercharge. His charge rate was reverted back to 40% from its current 25%. The speed boost gained from the hypercharge was increased from 20% to 24%. In exchange for this, the Let's Fly gadget would no longer charge the hypercharge. The damage boost from the hypercharge was decreased from 25% down to 15%. The shield boost was decreased from 25% to 15% as well. An additional change was made to all hypercharges as well. The duration of the hypercharge would be a flat 5 seconds and could no longer be extended. This would take us all the way to present day, receiving no new balance changes since the nerfs. Supercell left Edgar in arguably the most balanced state possible. He remains in the middle of the pack among competitive players, but a frustrating one for low-skilled players. I highly doubt we will see many more changes to Edgar in the future. Buffing or nerfing him could disrupt the balance. One thing that will likely never change is the fact that he is the most hated brawler in Brawl Stars.